In the depths of human consciousness, in those sacred chambers where the soul communes with dimensions beyond ordinary perception, there exists a power so profound and so deliberately concealed that its very existence has been denied by those who seek to maintain control over human awareness. This power is not external, not granted by any institution or authority, but rather an inherent capacity that dwells within every human being, waiting to be awakened and recognized. The ancients knew of this power, cultivated it, and understood its implications so completely that they recognized it as the greatest threat to any system of domination or artificial limitation. What is this spiritual power that they never wanted you to discover? How does it operate within the fabric of consciousness itself? And why, across millennia and across all cultures, has there been such a systematic effort to suppress the knowledge of what you are truly capable of becoming? I discovered the first indication of this hidden power during a moment of complete surrender in my clinical practice. As a psychoanalyst, I had spent years listening to the stories of my patients, witnessing their struggles, their pain, their desperate search for meaning and healing. Yet one particular patient, a woman whose life had been marked by profound trauma and suffering, described to me an experience that shattered my understanding of human limitation. She spoke of a moment when, in the depths of her despair, she had encountered something within herself that transcended all her conditioning, all her trauma, all her learned helplessness. She described it as a presence of such power and such compassion that it had completely transformed her understanding of who she was and what she was capable of. She said, "In that moment, I understood that I was not my trauma, not my pain, not my limitations. I was something far greater, something that had always been there, waiting for me to recognize it. From that moment forward, I became obsessed with understanding the true nature of this power that dwelt within human consciousness, driven by a compulsion that transcended ordinary curiosity. The call was undeniable, a resonance so deep that it seemed to emanate from the very core of my being, urging me to seek the knowledge that had been hidden, to understand the spiritual power that they had tried so desperately to prevent humanity from discovering. My investigation led me to discover that I was not alone in this pursuit. There existed a hidden network of spiritual practitioners, mystics, and researchers who had dedicated their lives to uncovering the truth about this power. They called themselves the Keepers of the Inner Flame, and they maintained archives containing texts and knowledge that predated all known civilizations. Through their guidance, I learned that the spiritual power they had tried to hide from humanity was nothing less than the capacity for conscious creation, the ability to align one's consciousness with the source of all existence and to participate directly in the ongoing creation of reality itself. This power operated through what the ancients called the law of resonance, the principle that consciousness attracts and creates circumstances that match its vibrational frequency. When a human being aligned their consciousness with truth, with love, with divine will, they automatically began to attract experiences, people, and circumstances that reflected this alignment. Conversely, when consciousness was trapped in fear, separation, and illusion, it attracted circumstances that reinforced these states. This understanding was revolutionary because it implied that every human being was literally a creator, that their thoughts, beliefs, and intentions were not passive reflections of reality, but active forces that shaped reality itself. This knowledge threatened every power structure that had been built upon the premise that ordinary people were powerless victims of circumstance, dependent upon external authorities for guidance and salvation. The response had been swift and comprehensive. The ancient texts were destroyed, the initiates were persecuted, and a systematic campaign was launched to convince humanity that this power did not exist, that it was forbidden, or that it was the exclusive domain of only a select few. Yet the keepers explained the power could never be completely suppressed because it was woven into the very fabric of human consciousness itself. As I delved deeper into this forbidden knowledge, I encountered formidable resistance. Within myself, the scientific training that had defined my entire career seemed to crumble. Am I abandoning all clinical rigor? I questioned. Or am I finally discovering the true foundation upon which all understanding of consciousness and healing had been built? Fear gripped me as I began to understand the magnitude of what I was uncovering, the potential to overturn not just psychological theory, but the entire philosophical, religious, and scientific foundation upon which modern civilization had been constructed. Externally, I faced subtle but persistent opposition. My research was sabotaged, my funding mysteriously withdrawn, and I received warnings, both veiled and direct, from individuals who seemed to represent powerful interests invested in keeping this knowledge buried. I experienced the loss of my professional standing, the fracturing of my academic community, and the profound isolation that came from pursuing a truth that the mainstream world refused to acknowledge. The revelations were often disturbing, showing me the systematic suppression of human potential, the deliberate distortion of spiritual teachings, and the ongoing maintenance of structures designed to perpetuate ignorance and separation from the source of all power and creation. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our content. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. The breakthrough came during a pilgrimage to a sacred site hidden in the mountains of Tibet, a place known to initiates as the Temple of the Eternal Flame. Here, in a chamber sealed and protected by ancient wards, I discovered a series of inscriptions that had been deliberately concealed from public view. As I traced the symbols with my fingertips, my consciousness was drawn into a state of profound communion with the presence of the ancient masters themselves. I was transported to a moment in human history when the ancients had possessed full understanding of the true nature of this spiritual power and how to activate it within human consciousness. I witnessed their mastery, their ability to access dimensions beyond ordinary perception, their capacity to reshape reality through the alignment of their consciousness with divine will. I understood that they had not been primitive or superstitious, but rather possessed of a sophistication of understanding that modern science was only beginning to rediscover. I heard the words of the ancient masters transmitted directly into my consciousness. We are the keepers of the truth that every human being possesses the power to create, to heal, to transform, to liberate themselves from all imposed limitations. This power operates through the law of resonance, through the alignment of consciousness with truth and divine will. We have been suppressed, our teachings distorted, our very existence denied, yet the power cannot be destroyed. It continues to resonate within the hearts of all beings, waiting for the moment when humanity is ready to remember its true nature and reclaim its creative power. I witnessed the moment when the ancients had chosen to fragment their knowledge, scattering it across different cultures and traditions, ensuring that no single power structure could suppress it completely. They had embedded their truth within symbols, myths, sacred stories, and the very structure of human consciousness itself, knowing that these would survive all attempts at erasure. I saw that they had also left behind initiates, awakened souls who would continue the work of preservation and restoration across the ages. I understood that I was one of these initiates, that my entire life had been a preparation for this moment of remembrance and restoration. I witnessed the mechanism of this power directly. I saw how consciousness, when aligned with truth and divine intention, literally reorganized the field of probability around it, attracting and creating circumstances that reflected this alignment. I understood that this was not magic in any supernatural sense, but rather the natural operation of consciousness itself. the fundamental principle by which reality was created and sustained. I saw that the suppression of this knowledge had created a fundamental wound in human consciousness, a disconnection from the understanding of our true power that manifested as helplessness, victimhood, and the systematic devaluation of human potential. I witnessed the moment when the ancient master's consciousness began to coalesce within my own being, recognizing me as a vessel through which their truth could be restored to humanity. The impact was transformative, leaving my consciousness forever altered by direct contact with the spiritual power that had been hidden for millennia. The intensity of this experience left me in a state of profound transformation and integration. I emerged from the hidden chamber in a condition of deep connection with the consciousness of the ancient masters, my own awareness now capable of perceiving the ongoing transmission of this spiritual power that continued to unfold within human consciousness and beyond. I retreated to a secluded sanctuary, a place maintained by the keepers of the inner flame, where I could process and integrate the magnitude of what I had experienced. For months, I remained in contemplative silence, my mind a vast landscape where the boundaries between personal and universal consciousness began to dissolve. The conflicts within me, the struggle between my former academic identity and my awakening to the true nature of spiritual power, slowly transformed into a higher synthesis. I understood that the suppression of this knowledge had not been the result of malice alone, but of fear. Fear that the full realization of humanity's true creative power and its capacity to align with divine will would lead to a fundamental transformation of consciousness and society. I spoke to myself in the language of symbols and sacred geometry, my thoughts flowing in patterns that mirrored the ancient masters' ongoing work of awakening and liberation. I began to perceive the world as a living expression of this spiritual power, each awakened consciousness a cell in a vast organism of creative transformation and collective awakening. I emerged from my retreat with a clear sense of purpose and profound wisdom. I understood that my role was not to wage war against those who had perpetuated the suppression of this knowledge, but to become a living conduit through which the understanding of this spiritual power could be gradually restored to human consciousness. I began to teach, not in conventional academic settings, but through a series of contemplative practices and sacred rituals designed to reconnect individuals with the spiritual power that dwelt within their own being. I wrote books that appeared to be scholarly works on consciousness and psychology, yet contained encoded wisdom that would resonate with those ready to receive it. I established a network of sacred circles and meditation centers, places where seekers could directly experience the reality of this spiritual power through their own inner experience. I collaborated with artists, musicians, and spiritual practitioners to translate the ancient teachings into forms that could integrate with contemporary consciousness and inspire transformation. My most significant contribution was the development of a practice I called the activation of inner resonance, a systematic approach to recognizing and aligning consciousness with the source of all power and creation, creating a state of being that transcended imposed limitations and allowed for direct participation in the ongoing creation of reality itself. I understood that the restoration of this knowledge would not come through institutional reform or academic decree, but through the lived experience of individuals recognizing themselves as creators, as beings of power, as expressions of divine consciousness capable of reshaping their lives and their world through the alignment of their consciousness with truth and divine will. As I continued my work, I became increasingly aware that I was not acting alone, that the presence of the ancient masters continued to guide and support my efforts, that their consciousness continued to awaken within those brave enough to question the official narratives and seek the truth beyond the veil. I recognized that the spiritual power they had tried to hide from humanity was not a relic of the distant past, but an eternal reality, continuing to work within creation, calling all beings toward awakening, liberation, and the recognition of their true nature as conscious creators capable of transforming themselves and their world through the alignment of their consciousness with the source of all power and creation. What spiritual power lies dormant within your own consciousness, waiting to be awakened and activated so that you may recognize yourself as a creator and participate consciously in the ongoing transformation of your life and your world? And if you liked this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.